The blood-streaked sunset cast a crimson glow over the desolate prairie as Nora O'Malley crawled from beneath the splintered wagon, her trembling hands leaving red trails in the dust. 3 days had passed since the Apache raid that had destroyed everything she loved, leaving only silence and the smell of death in its wake. Wyoming Territory, 1875. The journey west to Kelton had promised a new beginning for the O'Malley family. Nora's father, a former Boston accountant with dreams of opening a mercantile in the growing frontier town, had convinced 12 other families to join their wagon train. Now, those dreams lay scattered across the brutal landscape, alongside broken wheels and unburied bodies. Nora's throat burned with thirst as she stumbled through the wreckage. She'd hidden for days, afraid the raiders might return to finish what they'd started. Her parents, her younger brother Timothy, all gone in a storm of arrows and gunfire. The water barrels had been smashed or taken, and the summer sun had transformed the prairie into an unforgiving furnace. "Just keep moving," she whispered to herself, her voice cracking like the dry earth beneath her feet. At 22, Nora had lived a sheltered life in Boston, ill-prepared for the harsh realities of the frontier. Her blue calico dress hung in tatters around her slender frame, and her auburn hair fell in matted tangles down her back. The sound of hoofbeats froze her in place. A rider approached from the west, silhouetted against the setting sun. Nora dropped to her knees behind the remains of a wagon wheel, her heart pounding. The hoofbeats slowed, then stopped. "Hello," a man's voice called out. "Anyone alive out here?" Nora remained still, uncertain whether to reveal herself. The man dismounted, his spurs jingling with each step as he walked through the carnage. "Dear God," she heard him mutter. "What a massacre." Through a gap in the wreckage, Nora could see him now, tall and broad-shouldered, with a revolver strapped to his hip. He wore a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt and a hat pulled low over his eyes. Not Apache, but that didn't mean he wasn't dangerous. As he moved closer to her hiding place, Nora shifted backward, dislodging a broken piece of wood that clattered to the ground. The man drew his pistol with lightning speed, pointing it directly at her hiding spot. "Come on out, slow and easy," he commanded. "I won't hurt you." Nora rose shakily to her feet, her hands raised. "Please," she whispered. "They took everything." The man holstered his weapon immediately, his weathered face softened as he took in her battered appearance. "Miss, are there any other survivors?" Nora shook her head, tears finally breaking free after days of shock had held them at bay. "Everyone's gone. My family, the others. I'm the only one left." The man approached cautiously, as if afraid she might bolt like a frightened deer. When he reached her, he removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair. His eyes, Nora noticed, were a startling shade of blue against his tanned skin. "My name's Cole Davenport. I ranch about 15 miles east of here." He shrugged out of his duster and wrapped it gently around her shoulders. "You're not alone anymore." Those simple words broke something inside her. Nora collapsed against his chest, sobbing uncontrollably as the full weight of her loss finally crashed over her. Cole held her awkwardly at first, then with more confidence, one hand patting her back while the other kept a watchful eye on the horizon. "We need to get moving before dark," he said when her sobs quieted. "There's water in my saddlebag, and my horse can carry us both to my place." "It's not safe here." Nora looked up at him, suddenly wary. "Why should I trust you?" A hint of respect flickered in Cole's eyes. "Smart question. Truth is, you've got no reason to, but I've got water, shelter, and protection to offer, and staying here is certain death." He gestured around them. "Raiders might come back to pick through what's left, or the wolves will come for the—" He didn't finish the sentence. Nora glanced at the scattered bodies of her fellow travelers. Many had been her friends for the entire journey from Boston. The thought of leaving them unburied tore at her heart, but Cole was right. There was nothing she could do for them now. "Is there anything you need to take with you?" Cole asked gently. Nora shook her head, then paused. "Wait." She scrambled back to the hidden space beneath the wagon where she'd been hiding and pulled out a small wooden box. "My mother's locket and my father's pocket watch. It's all I have left of them," Cole nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Let's go then. I'll come back with help to bury the dead properly, but right now my priority is keeping you alive." He helped her onto his horse, a sturdy dun gelding, before mounting up behind her. Nora sat stiffly, uncomfortable with the intimacy of a stranger's arms around her as he reached for the reins. Yet as the horse began to move away from the site of the massacre, she found herself leaning into his solid presence, too exhausted to maintain her guard. "I'm Nora," she said after they'd ridden in silence for nearly an hour. "Nora O'Malley. Where were you headed, Miss O'Malley?" Cole asked, his voice a low rumble she could feel through his chest. "Kelton. My father was going to open a store there," the words caught in her throat. "We'd saved for years for this journey." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Kelton's still about 4 days' ride from here. It's a decent enough town. Sheriff Buchanan keeps good order." The sun had fully set, and the vast Wyoming sky blazed with stars. In Boston, the buildings and gas lamps had obscured such celestial displays. Out here, the heavens seemed close enough to touch, indifferent to the human suffering below. "You've been through a hell no one should face," Cole said eventually. "But you survived, and that counts for something." Nora didn't answer. Survival didn't feel like much of an accomplishment when everyone she loved was dead. They rode through the night, stopping only briefly to rest the horse and drink from Cole's canteen. By dawn, Nora was swaying with exhaustion, her body bruised and battered from both the attack and the long ride. "There it is," Cole said as the sun crested the horizon. "Not much to look at, but it's home." Ahead of them stood a small ranch, a sturdy log cabin with a barn and corral nearby. Smoke drifted from the stone chimney, and a few cattle grazed in the distance. "You don't live alone?" Nora asked, suddenly alert. "Just me and Pedro, my ranch hand." "Good man, originally from Mexico. He's been with me 5 years now." Cole guided the horse toward the cabin. "And I've got a housekeeper who comes by twice a week from town, Mrs. Finch. She'll be here tomorrow, actually." Relief flooded through Nora. The presence of others made the situation feel less precarious. As they approached, a stocky man with a thick mustache emerged from the barn, his hand resting cautiously on the gun at his hip until he recognized Cole. "Senor Cole, you return early." The man's eyes widened when he saw Nora. "Que Paso, Apache raid on a wagon train about 15 miles west," Cole explained as he dismounted. "Miss O'Malley here is the only survivor. Pedro, can you see to Rusty? He's had a long night." Pedro nodded, his dark eyes sympathetic as he helped Nora down from the horse. "Lo siento, señorita." "This is a terrible thing." Cole led Nora to the cabin. Inside, it was simple but well kept. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with a wooden table and chairs in the center of the main room. A few bookshelves lined another wall, surprisingly well stocked for a frontier ranch. A door led to what appeared to be a bedroom, and a ladder climbed to a loft space above. "You can have my room," Cole said, gesturing to the bedroom. "I'll sleep in the loft. There's a wash basin and clean water. I'll see if I can find something for you to wear. Some of Mrs. Finch's things might fit you." Nora stood in the middle of the room, swaying slightly. Now that they had reached safety, the adrenaline that had kept her going was fading fast, leaving overwhelming fatigue in its wake. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Cole shook his head. "No need for that. Get some rest. We'll talk more when you've had sleep and food." He hesitated. "I'll ride out later to inform the sheriff about the attack and see about properly burying your people." Tears welled up again at the thought of her family and friends. "They deserve better than to be left for the wolves. I know." His voice was gentle. "I'll make sure they're taken care of, you have my word." Once alone in Cole's bedroom, Nora finally allowed herself to collapse. The bed was simple a frame with a straw-filled mattress covered in surprisingly clean sheets, but it felt like heaven after days of hiding under a broken wagon. She should wash, change into clean clothes, but exhaustion overcame her. As she drifted into sleep, the terrible images of the attack played behind her eyelids, her father falling with an arrow in his chest, her mother's screams, young Timothy trying to be brave even as fear filled his eyes. Nora woke with a start, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. Sunlight streamed through the small window, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back: the attack, the deaths, Cole finding her among the wreckage. A clean dress had been laid across the foot of the bed, along with a basin of fresh water and a bar of soap. Nora washed away the dirt and blood as best she could, wincing at the numerous cuts and bruises that covered her body. The dress was plain and a bit large, but clean and whole, unlike her tattered clothing. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Cole at the table, cleaning a rifle. He looked up at her entrance, his expression carefully neutral. "You look better," he said, setting the weapon aside. "There's stew on the stove, you must be hungry." Nora realized she was ravenous. She hadn't eaten properly since before the attack. "Thank you." As she ate the hearty beef stew, Cole explained that he'd sent Pedro to Kelton to inform Sheriff Buchanan about the attack and to bring back supplies. "The sheriff will organize a party to recover and bury the dead," he assured her. "It'll likely be tomorrow before they can get there." Nora nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. "Miss O'Malley, I need to ask you about what happened if you feel up to talking about it." Cole's voice was gentle but firm. Details about the raiders could help the sheriff track them down. Nora set down her spoon, the memories threatening to overwhelm her again. "It happened so fast. We had made camp for the night. My father was on watch with Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Gardner. The first arrow hit Mr. Reynolds in the throat." She shuddered. "Then they were everywhere on horseback, screaming war cries. Most of our men didn't even have time to grab their rifles." Cole listened intently as she described the chaos, how some of the women and children had tried to flee while the men attempted to fight back, how the wagons had been set ablaze, how she'd hidden beneath a broken wagon and remained there for 3 days, too terrified to move. "Did you recognize any tribal markings, what they wore, how they painted themselves?" Cole asked. Nora shook her head. "I don't know enough to tell one tribe from another, but one of them, I think he was the leader, had a scar across his face from his eye to his chin." Cole's expression darkened. "Red Knife. He leads a band of renegades. They've been raiding all across the territory. Will they be caught, eventually? The army's been after them for months." Cole hesitated. "Miss O'Malley, have you thought about what you'll do now? Do you have family elsewhere who could take you in?" The question landed like a stone in Nora's stomach. She had no one left. Her mother's sister lived in Philadelphia, but they had never been close, and Nora didn't even know her exact address. "No," she said simply. "There's no one." Cole nodded, his expression unreadable. "You're welcome to stay here until you decide what to do next. When Mrs. Finch comes tomorrow, she can help you get properly outfitted. She's got connections in town and can help you find work in Kelton if that's what you want." "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," Cole cut her off. "It's the decent thing to do." He stood abruptly. "I need to check the herd. Make yourself at home. There are books if you get bored." After he left, Nora explored the cabin. The bookshelf surprised her with its varied contents: novels by Dickens and Twain, volumes of poetry, and practical manuals on everything from animal husbandry to carpentry. On one shelf sat a small, framed daguerreotype of a pretty young woman with a serious expression. Nora picked it up, curious. "A wife." Cole hadn't mentioned being married. The door opened behind her and she hastily replaced the frame. "That's Sarah," Cole said, making Nora jump. She hadn't heard him return. "My late wife." "I'm sorry," Nora said, embarrassed at being caught snooping. "I didn't mean to pry." "It's all right." Cole moved to the shelf and picked up the daguerreotype. "She died 5 years ago. Fever took her and our unborn child." The pain in his voice was raw despite the passage of time. "I'm very sorry for your loss," Nora said softly. Cole set the picture down carefully. "Life out here is hard on women. Sarah was strong, but..." He shrugged. After she died, I thought about selling the ranch, heading back east, but this place was her dream as much as mine, couldn't bring myself to let it go. Nora understood. Dreams could be powerful anchors. Her father had dreamed of his store in Kelton for years. Now that dream lay buried with him on the Wyoming prairie. "What about you, Miss O'Malley? What was your dream in coming west?" Cole asked. The question caught her off guard. "I didn't have one, not really. I came because my family did." She paused, reflecting. "I suppose I wanted adventure in a way. Boston was predictable, but I never imagined this kind of adventure." "No one does," Cole said quietly. "The West is unforgiving to those who come unprepared." "Are you saying my family deserved what happened?" Nora's voice sharpened. "No," Cole said firmly. "No one deserves that. I'm saying the territories demand respect. They don't care about Eastern dreams or sensibilities." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Eventually, Cole cleared his throat. "I've got work to do. Rest today. Tomorrow will be soon enough to think about what comes next." That night, Nora lay in Cole's bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie, the distant howl of coyotes, the soft lowing of cattle, the creak of the cabin's timbers in the wind. Above her, she could hear Cole's footsteps in the loft as he settled in for the night. She thought about her family, about the futures they would never see. Her father would never open his store. Her mother would never plant the garden she had planned. Timothy would never grow into the man he was becoming. And what of her own future? What place was there in this brutal land for a young woman alone? Tears slipped down her temples, dampening the pillow. Grief and uncertainty wrapped around her like a shroud. Yet beneath it all was a tiny spark of something else, a realization that she had survived when others hadn't, and that perhaps there was meaning in that survival. Not comfort, not yet, but the first seed of purpose. Morning came with the aroma of coffee and bacon. Nora dressed quickly in the borrowed clothes and found Cole at the stove, frying slices of salt pork. "Good morning," he said, nodding toward the table where coffee was already poured. "Sleep well." "As well as could be expected," Nora replied honestly. "Thank you for breakfast." They ate in companionable silence until hoofbeats announced the arrival of visitors. Cole rose, his hand instinctively checking his holster before he moved to the window. "Sheriff's here with Mrs. Finch and Pedro," he announced, "and it looks like they've brought the doc along." Nora tensed. The arrival of others meant confronting her new reality, answering questions, making decisions, facing a future she hadn't planned for. Sheriff Buchanan was a tall man with iron gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. He removed his hat when introduced to Nora, his eyes kind despite his stern appearance. "Miss O'Malley, I'm sorry for your terrible loss," he said formally. "I've got 6 men ready to ride out to the site. We'll see to your people properly." "Thank you, Sheriff," Nora replied, fighting to keep her composure. Mrs. Finch was a plump woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She immediately took charge of Nora, clucking over her injuries and the ill-fitting borrowed dress. "You poor dear," she said, bustling around the cabin. "I've brought some of my daughter's things. She's married and living in Cheyenne now, but she left plenty behind that should fit you, Doctor." Wilson, a bespectacled man with gentle hands, examined Nora's injuries, pronouncing her remarkably unharmed considering the circumstances. "You've been very lucky, Miss O'Malley," he said. "No infection in these cuts and the bruises will heal in time." Lucky was not how Nora would have described herself, but she nodded politely, while the sheriff took Nora's detailed statement about the attack. Mrs. Finch prepared a proper bath in a zinc tub behind a screen in Cole's bedroom. The hot water was a luxury Nora hadn't expected, and she nearly wept with gratitude as she sank into it, washing away the last physical traces of her ordeal. Afterward, dressed in clean, properly fitting clothes, Nora felt almost human again. She joined the others in the main room where Cole and the sheriff were discussing the attack. "Red Knife's band has been growing bolder," the sheriff was saying. "Army's got a detachment tracking them, but they're slippery as eels." "This is the 3rd raid in 2 months," Cole added. First one this close to Kelton, though. They both looked up as Nora entered. Something flickered in Cole's eyes, surprise, perhaps, at the transformation a bath and clean clothes had wrought. Nora was painfully aware of her appearance. Her auburn hair, freshly washed and braided by Mrs. Finch, hung over her shoulder. The borrowed dress of blue cotton was simple but flattering to her slender figure. "Miss O'Malley," the sheriff said, standing, "we've been discussing your situation. I understand you were bound for Kelton?" "Yes," Nora confirmed. "My father was planning to open a mercantile there." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "There's currently no mercantile in town. Old man Prentice closed his store last winter and moved to California. Might be an opportunity there if you're of a mind to continue your father's plan." Nora blinked in surprise. The idea of carrying on her father's dream hadn't occurred to her. I wouldn't know the first thing about running a store." "Your father keep any records, inventory lists, supplier contacts, that sort of thing?" the sheriff asked. "Yes, in his journal." "But everything was in the wagon." "We'll look for it when we go out there," Sheriff Buchanan promised. "Meanwhile, Mrs. Finch has offered you a place to stay in town if you'd prefer that to remaining here." Mrs. Finch nodded eagerly. "My house is small, but there's a spare room. Used to be my daughter's, and I could introduce you to folks in town, help you get settled." Nora glanced at Cole, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. He had already done so much for her, and she couldn't impose on him indefinitely. Yet the thought of leaving the safety of the ranch filled her with unexpected anxiety. "That's very kind, Mrs. Finch," she said carefully, "but perhaps I should stay here a few more days until the burials are complete." She couldn't bring herself to say, "until my family is buried." "Of course, dear," Mrs. Finch patted her hand. "There's no rush. You've been through a terrible ordeal." The sheriff and Dr. Wilson prepared to leave, ready to lead the burial party to the site of the massacre. Cole saddled his horse to join them, despite Nora's insistence that he had already done enough. "I gave my word I'd see to them properly," he said simply. "We should be back by nightfall." As the men rode out, Mrs. Finch bustled around the cabin, cleaning and preparing a hearty stew for their return. Nora tried to help, but the older woman shooed her away. "You rest, dear. There'll be plenty of time for work later." Mrs. Finch paused in her cooking. "Cole Davenport is a good man, you know. Best rancher in these parts and honest to a fault. Lost his wife some years back and hasn't been the same since, but still, a good man." Nora wasn't sure how to respond to this apparent endorsement. "He's been very kind to me." Mrs. Finch nodded approvingly. "Not many would take in a stranger these days with all the troubles, but that's Cole for you." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Half the widows and spinsters in Kelton have set their caps for him, but he hasn't shown interest in remarrying." The day passed slowly. Pedro showed Nora around the ranch, the barn with its 6 horses, the small herd of cattle grazing on the surrounding land, the vegetable garden behind the cabin that had clearly seen better days. "Senor Cole, he tries with the garden, but he has no touch for growing things," Pedro explained with a smile. Senora Sarah, she was the one with the green fingers. By sunset, Nora was watching anxiously for the riders' return. When they finally appeared on the horizon, she felt a relief so profound it surprised her. Cole rode directly to the cabin, dismounting with the weariness of a man who had performed a difficult duty. "It's done," he told Nora quietly. "We found your father's journal in the wreckage. Sheriff has it. And this?" He handed her a small cloth bundle. Unwrapping it, Nora found her mother's silver hairbrush miraculously intact. Her throat tightened with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, that night after Mrs. Finch had gone to sleep in the loft, insisting that Cole take Pedro's bunk in the barn. Nora sat by the dying fire, running her fingers over her mother's brush. Cole joined her, offering a cup of coffee. "It'll be hard to sleep," he said, understanding in his voice. "Knowing they're properly laid to rest, it brings it all home somehow." Nora nodded, grateful for his insight. "Did you find all of them?" she asked, needing to know. "Yes, 13 graves in all. We marked them as best we could." Cole hesitated. Your father's journal is intact. Sheriff will bring it tomorrow. It has all his plans for the store, like you said. Lists of supplies, contacts in St. Louis and Chicago. I don't know if I can do it, Nora admitted. Open his store, I mean. I helped with the books in Boston, but running a business alone. You don't have to decide now, Cole assured her. Take time to heal first. Decisions can wait. They sat in companionable silence, watching the fire's dying embers. Nora found Cole's presence comforting, solid and dependable in a world that had suddenly become terrifyingly uncertain. Will you tell me about your ranch? She asked eventually. How you came to be here? Cole looked surprised at the request but nodded. Not much to tell. Came west after the war between the states. Served with the Union, though we don't talk much about that around here. Plenty of Confederate sympathizers in these parts. He took a sip of coffee. Worked cattle drives for a few years, saved my money, met Sarah in Cheyenne. She was working as a seamstress there. We married, bought this land 5 years later. It's a beautiful place, Nora said sincerely. The landscape was harsher than her native Massachusetts, but there was an austere beauty to the open skies and rolling prairie. It is, Cole agreed. Sarah fell in love with it right away. Said she could breathe out here, not like in the city. A shadow crossed his face. After she died, I nearly let the place go to ruin. Pedro kept it together while I was. Well, I wasn't much good to anyone for a while. Nora understood grief's paralyzing power all too well. How did you find your way back? Cole considered the question. Time, mostly, and realizing that Sarah would have been mighty angry at me for wasting what we built together. A small smile touched his lips. She had a temper, my Sarah, sweet as honey until you crossed her. Nora smiled at this glimpse of the woman in the daguerreotype. She sounds wonderful. She was. Cole stood, stretching. We should get some sleep. Tomorrow will be another day. Over the next week, a routine emerged. Nora helped Mrs. Finch with cooking and housekeeping, gradually taking on more responsibilities as her strength returned. Cole and Pedro worked the ranch from dawn till dusk, bringing in stray cattle and repairing fences damaged in a recent storm. Sheriff Buchanan returned with her father's journal, which proved to be an unexpectedly powerful connection to him. Reading his neat handwriting, his detailed plans and enthusiastic notes about opportunities in Kelton, Nora felt as though he was speaking to her directly. The pain of loss remained sharp, but alongside it grew a determination to honor his memory. On her 8th day at the ranch, Nora approached Cole as he worked in the corral, training a young horse. I've decided to go to Kelton, she announced, to see about opening my father's store. Cole paused, the lariat in his hands going slack. You're sure? Nora nodded. Mrs. Finch has offered me a place to stay while I get established, and the sheriff says the old mercantile building is still available for lease. It's a big undertaking for a woman alone, Cole said, though there was no discouragement in his tone, only acknowledgement of the challenge. I know. But it's what he would have wanted, and… Nora took a deep breath. And I need something to work toward, a purpose. Cole studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I understand that. When do you plan to leave? Mrs. Finch returns to town tomorrow. I thought I'd go with her if that's all right. Of course. Cole turned back to the horse, his movements more abrupt than before. It's your decision. That evening, as Nora packed the few belongings she had accumulated, clothes given by Mrs. Finch, her mother's hairbrush and locket, her father's pocket watch, she felt Cole's absence keenly. He had ridden out after their conversation and not returned for dinner. Mrs. Finch, observant as ever, noticed her frequent glances toward the door. He'll be back, she assured Nora. Cole sometimes needs space to think. Man carries a lot inside him. When he finally returned, well after dark, Nora was sitting alone by the fire, Mrs. Finch having retired to the loft. Cole hung his hat by the door and poured himself a cup of coffee before joining her. I went to check the north pasture fence, he explained, though Nora hadn't asked, been meaning to get to it for days. Mr. Davenport, Nora began formally, then stopped herself. Cole. I want to thank you for everything you've done. You saved my life and you've shown me nothing but kindness." Cole stared into his coffee. Any decent man would have done the same. "Perhaps, but it was you who found me and I'm grateful." Nora hesitated. "I hope you'll visit if you come to Kelton." "I'd like to know how you're faring." He looked up then, his blue eyes meeting hers directly. "Nora, are you sure about this? Running a store isn't easy, especially for a woman on her own. Kelton's growing, but it's still a rough place." "I'm not sure of anything anymore," she admitted. "But I have to try. I can't stay here indefinitely living off your charity." "It's not charity," Cole said sharply. Then, more gently, "You could stay. Work the ranch with us. God knows we could use the help, especially with the garden." He attempted a smile. "Place has been a disaster since Sarah died." The offer caught Nora by surprise. "You're offering me a job?" Cole set his coffee down, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Not exactly. I'm offering you a home if you want it. The ranch is big enough for both of us to have our space. You'd be safe here." The implication was clear: safer than in town, where a single woman would be vulnerable. Yet something in his expression suggested more than mere concern for her welfare. "I don't know," Nora said honestly. "I hadn't considered staying." "Sleep on it," Cole suggested, rising from his seat. "No need to decide tonight." Morning brought no clarity. Nora packed her few possessions while Mrs. Finch prepared breakfast, her mind turning Cole's offer over and over. Staying would be the safer choice, certainly. The ranch was isolated but secure, and Cole and Pedro would provide protection. Yet something in her rebelled against choosing safety over her father's dream, and perhaps, if she was honest, her own emerging ambitions. Cole was unusually quiet at breakfast, responding to Mrs. Finch's cheerful chatter with monosyllables. When it was time to leave, he helped load Mrs. Finch's wagon with supplies he was sending to town. "Cole tells me you're thinking of staying on," Mrs. Finch said casually as they worked. "That might be wise, dear. A woman needs protection out here." Nora bristled slightly at the implication. "I appreciate his offer, but I believe I can manage in town. The sheriff assured me Kelton is safe enough." "Oh, it is, as frontier towns go," Mrs. Finch agreed, "but running a store alone will be difficult, and there are certain men who see a woman without family as fair game." The warning was well-intentioned, but frustrating. Nora had lived her whole life with such cautions. Boston society had its own strict rules for young women. She had hoped the West might offer more freedom, not less, as Mrs. Finch climbed onto the wagon seat. Nora turned to Cole, who stood nearby, his expression unreadable. "I've decided to go to Kelton," she told him, lifting her chin slightly in determination. "I appreciate your offer, truly, but I need to at least try to fulfill my father's dream." Cole nodded, his jaw tight. "I understand." He helped her up beside Mrs. Finch, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "The offer stands if things don't work out in town." As the wagon pulled away, Nora looked back to see Cole standing in the yard watching them go. A curious emptiness opened within her, as if she was leaving something important behind. Kelton proved to be larger than Nora had expected: a proper town with a main street lined with businesses, a church, a schoolhouse, and even a small hotel. The old mercantile building stood at the center of town, its large windows dusty but intact, the interior empty but sound. Sheriff Buchanan introduced her to Mr. Whitaker, the banker who held the lease on the building. A portly man with suspicious eyes, he seemed dubious about renting to a young woman until the sheriff mentioned that Nora was continuing her late father's business. "O'Malley, you say? The one from that massacred wagon train?" Mr. Whitaker's expression softened marginally. "Well, I suppose we could arrange something. $50 a month for the building, plus another $20 for the rooms upstairs." Nora blanched at the sum. Her father's journal mentioned $30 for the entire property. "That seems rather steep, Mr. Whitaker." The banker shrugged. "Prices have gone up. Kelton's growing fast." Sheriff Buchanan cleared his throat. "Prentice was paying $35 total when he left 6 months ago, Whitaker. Don't try to inflate it now." The banker reddened but adjusted his offer. 40 then, that's my final price. Nora consulted her father's journal, where he had carefully calculated expected expenses against his savings. Even at $40, it would be tight, but possible if she could secure credit with suppliers until the store began turning a profit. I'll take it, she decided. But I'll need time to order inventory, 2 weeks before I begin paying rent. Mr. Whitaker opened his mouth to refuse, but the sheriff cut in. Seems reasonable to me. Girl's got to have something to sell before she can pay rent, Whitaker. The deal was struck, and Nora found herself the proud tenant of Kelton's only mercantile. The upper floor included 3 small rooms, a bedroom, a sitting room, and a tiny kitchen with a wood stove. Basic but sufficient for her needs, Mrs. Finch introduced her to key figures in town: Reverend Thompson and his wife at the church, Mrs. Henderson, who ran the hotel, Dr. Clark, whose practice occupied the building next to the mercantile, and numerous others whose names blurred together. Everyone was polite, if somewhat reserved, clearly taking measure of the newcomer in their midst. That night, in the small bedroom above the empty store, Nora sat at the window looking out at the town. Lamplight shone from windows, and occasional bursts of laughter emerged from the saloon down the street. It was so different from both Boston and Cole's ranch, neither city nor wilderness, but something in between. She opened her father's journal, running her fingers over his neat columns of figures and lists of potential stock. Dry goods, canned foods, tools, fabric, medicines, ammunition, the essentials of frontier life. Using his contacts, she drafted letters to suppliers in St. Louis and Chicago, explaining her situation and requesting the same terms her father had arranged. 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Nora cleaned the store from top to bottom, arranged for shelving to be built, and waited anxiously for responses from suppliers. Mrs. Finch introduced her to other women in town, who were initially curious but gradually warming to her presence. The first shipment arrived by wagon from the railroad station at Laramie, crates of dry goods and canned foods, tools, ammunition, and fabrics. Nora spent days organizing the merchandise, pricing items according to her father's calculations, and preparing for opening day. Sheriff Buchanan stopped by regularly to check on her progress and offer assistance when needed. "You're doing well, Miss O'Malley," he told her as she arranged a display of rifles. "Your father would be proud." "I hope so," Nora replied, surprised by how much the sheriff's approval meant to her. "I still have so much to learn. You'll learn by doing," he assured her. "That's the Western way." On the morning O'Malley's mercantile officially opened, Nora stood behind the counter in her best dress, stomach fluttering with nerves. Would anyone come? Would they trust a young woman to run a proper store? Had she made a terrible mistake in not accepting Cole's offer to stay at the ranch? Her first customer was Mrs. Henderson from the hotel, who purchased coffee, sugar, and a bolt of calico. "It's good to have a mercantile in town again," she declared. "Saves the trip to Laramie, and your prices are fair, which is more than I can say for old Prentice." Throughout the day, a steady stream of townspeople came to shop and, Nora suspected, to satisfy their curiosity about her. By closing time, she had made $37 in sales, a promising start. As she locked the front door, she noticed a familiar figure on horseback across the street. Cole Davenport sat atop his dun gelding watching the store. When he saw her notice him, he touched his hat in greeting but made no move to approach. Nora hurried across the dusty street. "Cole, what brings you to town?" "Needed supplies," he said, gesturing to the saddlebags. "And thought I'd see how you're faring." "Today was my first day open," Nora told him, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "It went well, I think," Cole nodded, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Good, that's good to hear. Won't you come in?" "I can make coffee, and there's still some of Mrs. Finch's bread left from yesterday." He hesitated, then shook his head. "Best be getting back before dark. Just wanted to make sure you were settled." Nora felt a stab of disappointment. "Of course. Well, thank you for checking on me. It means a lot." Cole studied her for a moment, his expression softening. "You look well, Nora. Town life seems to agree with you." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat again and rode away, leaving her standing in the street with a curious mixture of emotions she couldn't quite name. As summer turned to fall, O'Malley's Mercantile established itself as a fixture in Kelton. Nora worked long hours, learning the rhythms of the business, what items were in demand, how to negotiate with suppliers, and when to extend credit to customers who were short on cash but reliable with payment. She made friends, particularly with Rebecca Thompson, the Reverend's daughter, and slowly began to feel like part of the community. Yet there remained a distance. She was still the massacre survivor, an object of curiosity and sympathy rather than a true equal. Cole came to town infrequently, always stopping by the store but never staying long. Each visit left Nora with a strange restlessness that lingered for days afterward. She found herself watching the street for his arrival and chided herself for such foolishness. He had been kind to her in her hour of need. Nothing more. In late September, as Nora was closing the store for the evening, she heard raised voices from the saloon across the street. Such disturbances were not uncommon, especially on paydays when ranch hands came to town, but something about the commotion drew her attention. A group of men emerged onto the boardwalk, surrounding a tall figure she recognized immediately: Cole. His face was bloodied, and he seemed to be struggling against the men holding him. Without thinking, Nora rushed across the street. "What's happening here?" she demanded. One of the men, a local ranch hand named Tucker, turned to her with a sneer. "Stay out of this, Miss O'Malley. This ain't women's business." "Nora, go back to the store," Cole said, his voice strained. "I can handle this." "Like hell you can, Davenport," Tucker spat. "We don't take kindly to Union men in these parts, especially ones who help Indians." "What are you talking about?" Nora asked, confused. "Your friend here's been giving supplies to those Apache devils," another man accused. "Same ones that killed your folks. Sheriff found the evidence at his ranch." Cole shook his head, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. "That's not what happened, and Buchanan knows it. I traded with Peaceful Skies Band. They're reservation Apache, not raiders." "Apache is Apache," Tucker insisted, "and we're gonna teach you what happens to Indian lovers in Kelton." Nora stepped forward, placing herself between Cole and the angry men. "This is ridiculous. Mr. Davenport saved my life after the raid. He helped bury my family. He would never support raiders." Her presence seemed to confuse the men, who looked uncertainly at each other. The moment of hesitation was broken by Sheriff Buchanan's arrival, revolver drawn. "That's enough, boys," he said firmly. "Break it up now or spend the night in my jail." The men dispersed reluctantly, muttering threats as they went. Sheriff Buchanan holstered his weapon and approached Cole and Nora. "Davenport, I warned you about coming to town right now. Tensions are high after that raid on the Peterson place." He shook his head in exasperation. "Miss O'Malley, would you mind seeing to his injuries? I need to make sure those hotheads don't cause more trouble." Before she could respond, the sheriff strode off after the dispersing men. Cole sagged against the hitching post, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Come with me," Nora said decisively. "I have medical supplies upstairs." In her small apartment above the store, Nora cleaned the cut above Cole's eye and the split in his lip, trying to ignore the strange intimacy of tending to his injuries. He sat silently as she worked, his eyes following her movements. What did the sheriff mean about the Peterson place? She asked finally, applying a salve to the cut. Cole sighed. "Raid 3 days ago, small homestead about 20 miles north of here. Family of 4 all killed." Nora's hands stilled. "The same raiders who attacked my wagon train, probably. Red Knife's band." Cole winced as she resumed her ministrations. "I do trade with Peaceful Skies people occasionally. They're peaceful, like their name says. Reservation Apache who sometimes hunt in this territory with Army permission. And people think you're helping the raiders because of that." Nora asked incredulously. "Some do." There's always been tension between settlers and the tribes. Any contact is suspicious to certain folks. Cole shrugged. Usually it blows over, but with these recent raids. Nora finished bandaging his cut and stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they'd been standing. Will you be safe going home? Safe enough. Those men were drunk and looking for someone to blame. They've likely forgotten all about me by now. Cole stood, testing his bruised ribs with a grimace. Thank you for the doctoring. It's the least I could do after everything you've done for me. Nora hesitated. Cole, I never properly thanked you for saving my life, finding me, bringing me to your home. I wouldn't be here without you. Cole looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. No, they wouldn't have, Nora insisted. Most would have buried me with the others and moved on. You gave me a chance at a new life. Something shifted in Cole's expression, a softening around the eyes, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. You've done well with that chance. Your father would be proud of what you've built here. The mention of her father brought a pang of grief, still fresh despite the months that had passed. I hope so. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing staying in Kelton. The memories are difficult. Where else would you go? Cole asked quietly. Nora thought of Boston, of her old life that now seemed to belong to someone else entirely. I don't know, back east perhaps, or... She met his gaze directly. Your offer to stay at the ranch, is it still open? Cole went very still. It is, but why would you consider it now? You've established yourself here. The store is doing well. Is it? Nora moved to the window, looking down at the darkened street below. I work from dawn till dusk, and most days I barely break even. Winter's coming, and I'm not sure I have enough saved to get through till spring. It wasn't only financial concerns that troubled her, though. Since the day Cole had ridden away after checking on her, Nora had felt a curious emptiness that the bustle of town life couldn't fill. She missed the quiet evenings by the fire, the vast open skies, the sense of peace she'd found at the ranch despite her grief. The ranch isn't exactly profitable either, Cole admitted. It's a hard life. I know, but at least it's. Nora struggled to find the words. It felt like somewhere I could belong. Here I'm still the outsider, the survivor. Cole crossed the room to stand beside her at the window. And at the ranch, what would you be there? The question hung between them, laden with unspoken meanings. Nora turned to face him, suddenly acutely aware of his proximity, the scent of leather and prairie wind that clung to him. I don't know, she said honestly. Your friend, I hope. Your partner in running the ranch, perhaps. Something flickered in Cole's eyes, hope, wariness, she couldn't tell which. Is that all? Nora's heart hammered in her chest. What else could there be? Cole reached out slowly, giving her time to move away if she wished, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I think you know, Nora. I think we both do. The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Nora had known, somewhere deep inside, from the day he found her, this man would matter to her in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. I'm not Sarah, she whispered, giving voice to her deepest fear. I can't replace her. I'm not asking you to. Cole's voice was gentle but firm. Sarah is part of my past, and I'll always carry her with me, but you could be my future if you wanted. Before Nora could respond, shouts erupted from the street below. They both turned to the window to see flames leaping from a building down the street, the livery stable, where Cole had left his horse. Fire! Someone yelled. Fire at Henderson's livery! Cole was already moving toward the door. I need to get Rusty out. Nora grabbed her shawl and followed him down the stairs and into the street, where townspeople were gathering with buckets and blankets to fight the spreading flames. The livery stable was engulfed, horses screaming in terror inside. Cole ran toward the burning building, but Sheriff Buchanan intercepted him. Too late for that, Davenport. Building's about to collapse. As if in confirmation, the roof of the stable creaked ominously, then caved inward in a shower of sparks and burning timbers. The screams of the trapped horses fell silent, a more terrible sound than their panic had been. Cole stood frozen, his face reflecting the orange glow of the flames. Nora reached for his hand, feeling his fingers close around hers with desperate strength. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Sheriff Buchanan organized the Bucket Brigade, focusing on preventing the fire from spreading to adjacent buildings. As the townsfolk worked, Nora overheard snippets of conversation. Saw Tucker and his boys hanging around the livery earlier. Targeting Davenport's horse, that's for sure. Got what he deserved, Indian lover. Cole heard too. His expression hardened and he released Nora's hand. "I need to speak to Buchanan." Nora waited anxiously while Cole conferred with the sheriff, their conversation inaudible over the crackling flames and shouted instructions of the firefighting effort. When Cole returned, his face was grim. "Buchanan thinks Tucker and his friends set the fire deliberately, trying to destroy my property. They didn't intend for the whole stable to go up or for the other horses to be trapped." His voice was flat with controlled anger. "He's going after them now." "What will you do?" Nora asked. Cole looked back at the burning building, now collapsed into a heap of glowing embers. "I need to get back to the ranch, make sure Pedro is all right. They might try something there next." Fear clutched at Nora's heart. "You can't travel at night without a horse." "I'll borrow one from the sheriff." Cole's expression softened as he looked at her. "Nora, about what we were discussing before." "It can wait," she interrupted. "Your safety is more important right now." Cole nodded but caught her hand before she could turn away. "Think about what I said. About the future, our future." By morning, the livery stable was a smoldering ruin. 7 horses had died in the fire, a devastating loss for the small town. Sheriff Buchanan had arrested Tucker and 2 other men who now faced charges of arson and destruction of property. Nora opened the store as usual, though her mind was elsewhere. Cole had ridden out before dawn on a horse borrowed from the sheriff, promising to return in a few days once he was certain the ranch was secure. Their conversation, interrupted by the fire, lingered in her thoughts, the possibilities it had opened both exhilarating and terrifying. Could she leave the store, her father's dream, to return to the ranch? Could she build a life with Cole, a man she had known for only a few months? Yet in those months, he had shown her more kindness and understanding than many she had known for years. Mrs. Finch visited the store that afternoon, ostensibly to purchase supplies but clearly bursting with town gossip. "They say those men set the fire specially to destroy Cole Davenport's horse," she told Nora while examining a bolt of calico. "Sheriff found a witness who heard Tucker bragging about teaching the Indian lover a lesson." "It's terrible," Nora agreed, arranging canned goods on a shelf. "Mr. Davenport has done nothing wrong." Mrs. Finch gave her a shrewd look. "You've grown fond of him, haven't you, dear?" Nora busied herself with the cans, avoiding the older woman's gaze. "He saved my life. I owe him a great deal." Mrs. Finch hummed skeptically. "Well, he's a good man, despite what some say, and he could use a woman's touch around that ranch of his." She selected the calico and moved to the counter. Just something to think about. 3 days passed with no word from Cole. Nora found herself watching the street constantly, anticipation and worry warring within her. On the 4th day, as she was closing the store, Sheriff Buchanan arrived with news that made her blood run cold. "There's been another raid," he said without preamble. "Davenport's ranch, Pedro's dead." "No sign of Cole." Nora gripped the counter for support. "No, that can't be." "Got a rider from the army post this morning. They found the place burning yesterday. Pedro's body was in the barn." The sheriff's face was grim. "They're tracking the raiders now." "And Cole?" "He must be alive, he must be." Nora's voice rose with desperation. "No sign of him at the ranch. Could be they took him. Could be." The sheriff didn't finish the thought. "Miss O'Malley, I know this is difficult, but if they did take him, the chances aren't good." Nora shook her head, refusing to accept the possibility. "You don't know Cole. He's strong, resourceful. He could have escaped, be hiding somewhere." Sheriff Buchanan didn't contradict her, but his expression was pitying. "Army's doing everything they can. I'll let you know as soon as I hear anything more." After he left, Nora sank to the floor behind the counter, her legs no longer able to support her. The possibility of Cole's death was like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs. Only now, faced with losing him, did she fully understand the depth of her feelings. She had fallen in love with him. Somewhere between the moment he found her amid the massacre and their interrupted conversation 3 nights ago, Nora O'Malley had given her heart to Cole Davenport. And now he might be gone, like everyone else she had loved. The night passed in sleepless vigil. By morning, Nora had made her decision. She wouldn't wait passively for news. She would go to the ranch herself, see the destruction firsthand, perhaps find some clue the army had missed. She approached Mrs. Henderson at the hotel, who owned a small buggy she sometimes rented out. "I need to borrow your buggy for a few days. I'll pay whatever you ask." Mrs. Henderson looked concerned. "You're going out to Davenport's place. That's not safe, Miss O'Malley, not with raiders about." "I have to go," Nora insisted. "Please." Something in her expression must have conveyed her determination, for Mrs. Henderson sighed and nodded. "Very well, but take this." She produced a small revolver from a drawer. "My late husband's. Do you know how to use it?" Nora took the weapon uncertainly. "I've never fired a gun." "Point and pull the trigger. Aim for the middle of what you want to hit." Mrs. Henderson demonstrated the proper grip. "And for heaven's sake, be careful. I don't want your death on my conscience." Before leaving town, Nora visited the general store, purchasing supplies for the journey: food, water, blankets, and ammunition for the revolver. Sheriff Buchanan caught her as she was loading the buggy. "Miss O'Malley, this is foolishness," he said bluntly. "The army is already searching." "What do you hope to accomplish?" "I don't know," Nora admitted, "but I can't just sit here waiting. I need to see for myself." The sheriff studied her face, then nodded reluctantly. "I can see your mind's made up. At least take the main trail and keep your eyes open. If you see any sign of trouble, turn back immediately." The journey to Cole's ranch took most of the day. Nora followed the main trail as advised, constantly scanning the horizon for any movement. The revolver lay on the seat beside her, a comforting presence despite her lack of experience with firearms. As the sun began its descent, the ranch came into view in the distance. Even from afar, Nora could see the destruction: the blackened shell of the cabin, the collapsed barn. The sight stole her breath, but she urged the horse forward, determined now to see it through. The ranch yard was a scene of devastation. The cabin's roof had caved in, its walls still standing but charred and unstable. The barn was worse, reduced to a heap of burned timbers. Evidence of the army's presence remained: bootprints in the dust, markers where they had found Pedro's body. Nora climbed down from the buggy, her legs stiff from the long ride. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. She moved carefully through the yard, searching for any sign that might indicate Cole's fate. Near the corral, she found tracks: many horses moving northwest. The raiders, presumably. The army would already be following these. But something else caught her eye: a single set of bootprints, moving away from the house toward a stand of cottonwoods that marked a small creek. Heart pounding, Nora followed the tracks. They led to the creek and continued along its bank for several hundred yards before disappearing among the rocks. Could these be Cole's prints? Had he escaped the attack by fleeing to the creek? The sun was setting, painting the horizon in shades of orange and purple. Nora knew she should return to the buggy, make camp for the night, but she couldn't bring herself to abandon the search. If Cole had followed this creek, where would he go? She remembered him mentioning a line cabin on the northern edge of his property, used during roundups when the men needed shelter away from the main ranch. It was some distance away, but if Cole had been injured, seeking familiar shelter would make sense. Darkness fell as Nora deliberated. Traveling at night was dangerous, but waiting until morning might be worse if Cole was injured and in need of help. Decision made, she returned to the buggy and retrieved the supplies she'd purchased, including a small lantern. With the lantern lit, she followed the creek north, moving as quickly as caution allowed. The terrain grew rougher, the creek cutting through a rocky gully that made travel difficult. Several times she slipped on wet stones, once falling hard enough to bruise her hip and tear her skirt. After what seemed like hours, Nora spotted a faint light ahead, a dim glow among the trees that could only be man-made. Her heart leaped with hope as she quickened her pace, ignoring the pain in her feet and the exhaustion that pulled at her limbs. The line cabin was small, little more than a one-room shack with a stone chimney. Light flickered through its single window, suggesting a fire within. Nora approached cautiously, the revolver gripped tightly in her hand. At the door, she hesitated. What if it wasn't Cole inside, but raiders using the cabin for shelter? Taking a deep breath, she knocked. Silence followed, then the scrape of a chair and footsteps approaching the door. A voice, weak but achingly familiar, called out, "Who's there?" "Cole, it's Nora. Nora O'Malley." The door flew open, revealing Cole Davenport alive but badly injured. Blood matted his hair on one side and he leaned heavily against the doorframe. His right arm hung uselessly at his side, wrapped in a makeshift bandage. "Nora." His voice held disbelief. "What in God's name are you doing out here?" Relief made her knees weak. "Looking for you. They said you were missing, maybe dead. I had to know." Cole stared at her for a long moment, then stepped back to let her enter. The cabin's interior was sparse: a small table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed against one wall, and a stone fireplace where a modest fire burned. "You came all this way alone. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" Despite his obvious pain, anger colored Cole's voice. "Raiders could still be in the area. You could have been killed." "I had to find you," Nora repeated simply, setting down her supplies. "You're hurt. Let me help." Cole sank into a chair, the brief flare of anger fading into exhaustion. "Arrow caught me in the shoulder. I got it out, but I think the wound's infected. Been running a fever." Nora unwrapped the crude bandage, revealing an angry red wound that oozed pus. "This needs proper cleaning. Do you have any medical supplies here?" Saddlebag by the bed, basic kit. Cole's eyes never left her face, as if he still couldn't believe she was real. "Nora, how did you find me?" "The army searched the main ranch. I saw tracks by the creek," she explained, retrieving the medical kit. "And I remembered you mentioning this cabin once. It seemed logical you might come here if you were hurt." A faint smile touched Cole's lips. "Logical. That's one word for it. Damn miraculous is what it is." Nora cleaned the wound as best she could, applying salve from the kit and rewrapping it with clean bandages from her supplies. Cole's skin burned with fever under her touch, confirming his infection. "You need a doctor," she said worriedly. "This is beyond my skills to treat." Cole shook his head. "Can't travel yet, too weak." His eyes clouded with grief. "Pedro, I'm sorry," Nora said softly. "They found him in the barn." Cole closed his eyes briefly, pain that had nothing to do with his physical injuries crossing his face. "Good man, loyal to the end. He tried to fight them off while I got to the horses." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Fat lot of good it did. They shot my horse out from under me about a mile from the ranch. I only got away because they thought I was dead." Nora helped him to the bed where he lay back with a groan. "Rest now. We'll figure out what to do in the morning." Despite his protests, she insisted on taking the chair, wrapping herself in a blanket against the night's chill. As Cole's breathing eventually deepened into sleep, Nora watched the fire's dying embers, her mind turning over the events that had led them here. She had come west with her family, seeking a new beginning. Instead, she had found tragedy, loss, and now this moment keeping vigil over a wounded man she had come to love in a tiny cabin miles from civilization. Not the life she had imagined, yet somehow exactly where she needed to be. Morning revealed the full extent of Cole's illness. His fever had worsened overnight, and he drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes mistaking Nora for Sarah, other times reliving the raid on his ranch. Nora bathed his forehead with cool water from the creek, trying to lower his temperature, but it was clear the infection was spreading. "I need to get help," she told him during a lucid moment. "You'll die without a doctor." Cole gripped her hand weakly. "Too dangerous." Raiders could still be nearby. I'll be careful, Nora promised. I'll take the buggy and go to the army post. They can send a wagon for you. After ensuring Cole had water within reach and stoking the fire to last until her return, Nora set out for the main ranch where she had left the buggy. The journey seemed shorter in daylight, though no less challenging. At the ranch, she found the buggy undisturbed. As she prepared to leave for the army post, which Cole had told her lay about 10 miles to the west, the sound of approaching riders froze her in place. Ducking behind the burned-out cabin, Nora watched as a patrol of blue-coated soldiers rode into the yard. "Hello, the ranch," she called, stepping into view with her hands raised to show she posed no threat. The soldiers wheeled their horses toward her, rifles at the ready until they saw she was a woman. The lieutenant in charge dismounted, approaching with a puzzled expression. "Madam, this area isn't safe for civilians. What are you doing out here?" Nora quickly explained the situation: Cole's survival, his location, his desperate need for medical attention. The lieutenant immediately dispatched 2 men to the line cabin with instructions to bring Cole to the post infirmary. "You can ride with us, madam," he offered. "It's not proper for a lady to be out here alone." "I'll follow in my buggy," Nora said firmly. "I'm not leaving it behind." The army post was larger than she had expected, a substantial fort with barracks, officers' quarters, and a well-equipped infirmary. Dr. Richards, the post surgeon, immediately took charge of Cole when the soldiers brought him in, grim-faced at the severity of the infection. "You got to him just in time, Miss O'Malley," he told her after examining the wound. "Another day without treatment and we'd have been burying him instead." Nora remained at Cole's bedside as the doctor cleaned and treated the wound, administering quinine for the fever. Cole drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for Sarah, sometimes for Nora, often mumbling incoherently about the raid. Colonel Harrison, the post commander, interviewed Nora about the attack, adding her information to reports from his patrols. "Looks like Red Knife's band, same as hit your wagon train," he confirmed. "They've been growing bolder, striking closer to settlements. We'll get them, Miss O'Malley." "It's just a matter of time." For 3 days, Nora barely left Cole's side, sleeping in a chair beside his bed, helping the doctor change bandages and administer medicine. On the 4th day, his fever broke, and he woke fully lucid for the first time since they'd arrived at the fort. "You're still here," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I thought I dreamed you finding me." "I'm here," Nora confirmed, taking his hand. "You're going to be all right now." Cole's recovery progressed rapidly after that. Within a week, he was sitting up, taking short walks around the infirmary. His right arm remained weak, but Dr. Richards assured him the damage wasn't permanent. "You'll have full use of it again, given time and proper exercises," the doctor promised. "You're lucky, Davenport, very lucky indeed." "Not luck," Cole said, his eyes finding Nora across the room. "Something else entirely." As Cole regained his strength, they began to discuss the future. The ranch was destroyed, Pedro was dead, and Cole's savings wouldn't stretch to rebuilding everything that had been lost. "I could sell the land," he suggested one evening as they sat outside the infirmary watching the sunset. "Start fresh somewhere else." "Is that what you want?" Nora asked carefully. Cole was silent for a long moment. "That land was Sarah's dream as much as mine." "Feels like betraying her to give it up," he glanced at Nora. "But maybe it's time for new dreams." "What about your offer, for me to come back to the ranch?" Nora's heart hammered as she asked the question that had been on her mind for days. "That was before it was burned to the ground," Cole pointed out with a wry smile. "Not much to offer now, a patch of prairie and a line cabin." "That's not what you were offering," Nora said softly, "and you know it." Cole's expression grew serious. "No, it wasn't." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. "Nora, when I found you at that massacre site, something changed for me. I'd been half alive since Sarah died, just going through the motions. You woke something in me I thought was gone for good." "Cole, let me finish." His blue eyes held hers intently. "I love you, Nora O'Malley. I don't have much to offer right now, no home, no livestock, just land and a lot of hard work ahead. But if you want it, I'm offering you my heart and my future, whatever that might be." Tears filled Nora's eyes. "I love you too." "When I thought you might be dead." She shook her head, unable to express the devastation she had felt. "I don't care about buildings or possessions, I care about you." Cole lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Then we'll rebuild together, the ranch, our lives, everything." 2 weeks later, they returned to Kelton. The town welcomed them with a curious mixture of sympathy and wariness. Sympathy for their losses, wariness because the tensions between settlers and Native Americans remained high. Nora reopened the store while Cole took odd jobs around town to earn money for rebuilding the ranch. Each evening, they met in her small apartment above the Mercantile, planning their future together. "We should be married before we start rebuilding," Cole suggested one night. "Do things properly." Nora agreed, and a week later they stood before Reverend Thompson in Kelton's small church. The ceremony was simple, attended only by a few townspeople who had become friends: Mrs. Finch, Sheriff Buchanan, Rebecca Thompson, and Dr. Clark. Nora wore a new dress of pale blue cotton, while Cole had splurged on a proper suit for the occasion. "I, Cole, take you, Nora, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he promised, his voice steady as he held her hands in his. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." When Nora repeated the vows, she felt the weight of all they had endured together, the tragedy that had brought them together, the dangers they had faced, the love that had grown despite everything. This was not the life she had imagined when she left Boston, but it was the life she now chose with her whole heart. As autumn turned to winter, they lived above the store while Cole worked with hired hands to rebuild the ranch house. Snow came early that year, forcing a pause in construction, but by spring, the new cabin was ready for occupancy. Smaller than the original, but solid and well-built, with large windows that let in the prairie light. Nora sold the store to Rebecca Thompson, who had discovered an aptitude for business during the months she had helped out. The sale provided funds to stock the ranch with new cattle and horses, beginning the long process of rebuilding the herd. On their first night in the new cabin, Cole built a fire in the stone fireplace, its warm light filling the single large room that would serve as their home until more could be added. "It's not much," he said, looking around at the simple furnishings, "but it's a start." Nora moved to his side, slipping her arm around his waist. "It's perfect. It's ours." He kissed her then, a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, the challenges they would face, the joys they would share, the life they would build from the ashes of their respective losses. That spring, as new grass turned the prairie green, Nora planted a garden behind the cabin, determined to succeed where Sarah's garden had failed after her death. Cole watched her work with a tender expression, occasionally offering help but mostly letting her make it her own. "You're not competing with a ghost, you know," he told her one evening as she pored over seed catalogs. "Sarah would have liked you. She would have been glad I found happiness again." Nora looked up, surprised by his insight into her unspoken concerns. "I hope so." "I want to honor her memory, not erase it." "You do, every day," Cole assured her, "by loving this land as she did, by bringing life back to it." By summer, the ranch was beginning to thrive again. A small herd grazed on the surrounding grassland, the garden flourished behind the cabin, and Cole had hired 2 new ranch hands to help with the increasing workload. In July, as the first anniversary of the Wagon train massacre approached, Nora and Cole rode to the burial site. 13 simple wooden crosses marked the graves, weathered now by a year of wind and rain. Nora placed wildflowers on her family's graves, her father, mother, and young Timothy. "I miss them," she told Cole as they stood hand in hand before the crosses. "Every day, but the pain isn't as sharp now." "Is that disloyal, do you think?" "No," Cole said firmly. "It's healing. They wouldn't want you to live in grief forever." That night, as they lay together in their bed, Nora shared the news she had been keeping for several days, waiting for the right moment. "Cole, I'm with child." His face transformed with wonder and joy. "A baby, you're sure?" she nodded, smiling through happy tears. "Dr. Clark confirmed it yesterday. We'll become parents around Christmas time." Cole gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "A family," he whispered against her hair. "Our family." As her pregnancy progressed, Nora thought often of the journey that had brought her to this point. From the horror of the massacre to the promise of new life growing within her, it seemed impossible that so much could change in little more than a year. "Do you ever think about how we met?" she asked Cole one evening as they sat on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset. "How different our lives might have been if you hadn't found me that day." Cole considered the question seriously. "I think about it often, not the what-ifs, those don't matter now, but the moment I saw you standing there, covered in dust and blood but still fighting to survive. That moment changed everything for me. You said I wasn't alone anymore," Nora remembered. "Those were the first kind words I'd heard in days." "And they're still true," Cole said, placing his hand gently on her rounded belly. "Neither of us is alone anymore, and this little one never will be." Their son, William Thomas Davenport, was born on a snowy December night with Dr. Clark in attendance. He had Cole's blue eyes and a tuft of auburn hair that Nora was certain came from her side of the family. "He's perfect," Cole whispered, holding his son for the first time, awe and terror mingling in his expression. "Absolutely perfect." As William grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Cole added 2 rooms to the cabin, hired more hands to manage the increasing herd, and established a reputation for fair dealings that brought business even from those who had once been suspicious of him. Nora kept the garden thriving, preserved food for the winter months, and sometimes rode with Cole to check the herds, William securely fastened in a special carrier Cole had designed. Together, they created a home filled with warmth and laughter, a stark contrast to the circumstances that had brought them together. On William's 2nd birthday, as snow fell outside the windows of their now comfortable home, Cole presented Nora with a small wooden box. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find a silver locket nestled inside. "Open it," Cole encouraged. Inside were 2 tiny portraits, one of William, his chubby face serious for the photographer, and one of Cole, looking uncharacteristically formal in his best shirt. "It's beautiful," Nora said, tears welling in her eyes. "But why?" "Because you lost your mother's locket in the fire at the old cabin," Cole explained. "I wanted you to have a new one with your new family inside." Nora touched the precious gift, then reached for the wooden box where she kept her few remaining possessions from before the massacre. From it, she withdrew her mother's hairbrush and her father's pocket watch. "These are all that remain of my old life," she said, setting them beside the new locket. "But they're enough. They remind me where I came from, while this," she touched the locket again, "shows me where I am now and where I'm going." Cole helped her fasten the locket around her neck, his fingers lingering on the delicate chain. "Are you happy, Nora? Truly happy?" She turned to face him, taking in the man who had found her at her lowest moment and helped her build a new life from the ashes of the old. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she assured him. "Even in Boston, with all its comforts and certainties, I never felt as right as I do here with you." William toddled over, demanding attention, and Cole swept him up into his arms. "What do you think, young man? Has your mama made a good life out here on the prairie?" William nodded solemnly, then broke into a grin that melted Nora's heart. "Mama happy," he announced with the certainty only a 2-year-old could muster. Later that night, with William asleep in his small bed in the corner of their bedroom, Nora and Cole sat before the fire, planning for the future. In addition to the house in the spring, more cattle, perhaps another child. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed," Nora admitted. "When you found me that day, I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine ever feeling whole again. And now," Cole asked, his arm around her shoulders. Nora leaned into him, feeling the solid strength that had supported her through her darkest days. Now I know that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means building something new alongside the memories of what was lost. As the fire crackled and snow fell softly outside, Nora thought of all the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment: the devastating loss of her family, the chance encounter with a kind stranger, the slow rebuilding of two broken lives into one strong whole. "You're not alone anymore," Cole had told her on that blood-streaked day when they first met. Words that had seemed like small comfort then had proven to be a promise kept, a foundation on which they had built a life neither could have imagined amid the wreckage of their respective pasts. Outside, the Wyoming wind sang across the prairie, carrying with it the whispers of those who had been lost. Inside, the warmth of family and love kept the cold at bay, a beacon of life and hope in the vast wilderness. Nora O'Malley Davenport, once the sole survivor of a terrible tragedy, was now so much more a wife, a mother, a woman who had found her strength in the crucible of the frontier. And she was indeed no longer alone.